I'm Kirstin Egerton. I work at Weston. I started out as an associate engineer and then moved into environmental engineering / environmental management. A lot of the stuff I do is project development, working with Department of Ecology and the Environmental Protection Agency to follow different government regulations with air emissions and wastewater permitting.
Wow.
I started out here at SFCC, went here from 2011 to 2013, and then moved on to WSU and graduated there in 2016. I got degrees in chemical engineering, minors in math, chemistry, and a specialty in pre-med.
Wow. Was that dual major or was that majors with minors?
Majors with minors and specialties.
Very
so
cool.
just one major. Didn't want to go all out.
And what does that look like as a student? If you're taking one major, but then you're having specialties, minors, certifications, what does that look like?
There is a joke of there's multiple aspects of life. You have a personal life, you have a social life, you have relationships, you have eating, sleeping, and studying. Pick two. Maybe three, if you're balancing life pretty good. And so there are a bunch of nights of you're at school until 2 or 3 a.m. trying to get things done, especially around finals time when projects are due. And then there's other times where midterms are just taking place and you can go out and have some fun.
That's good.
Mm-hmm. And what career-wise, what was life like after you graduated from WSU? So how did you?
One of the things I would push is make sure you go to career fairs. The earlier you get your job offer, the better off you are, because my whole last semester at college was smooth sailing. I had a job offer before Thanksgiving, and so I wasn't worried about what am I going to do after college. I wasn't worried about how am I going to start paying back student loans. It was just more of I need to finish these classes and get good grades, and I'm home free. And whereas a lot of my other friends, they were still trying to do, am I going to go to grad school? Am I going to get a job? Am I even going to get a job offer? What schools am I going to get accepted to? And so there were so many of my friends that were just a big ball of stress their last semester. And whereas me, I'm just like, whatever, I got a plan. All I got to do is find an apartment. And so I got my job. I went for an internship my junior year. I ended up doing a bunch of lab work and instead of going down to Tri-Cities and working for ConAgra, which is now Weston. The following year, I did the fall career fair in October. Went through interviews, came down for a plant tour, did a couple more rounds of interviews, and got my job offer before Thanksgiving. And so signed all my papers, and I was set. I didn't have to worry about anything job-wise for finals week. I didn't have to worry about jobs or anything like that through all of my last semester. It was nice. But big helpful points is if you're wanting to go into research, make sure you work in labs. They definitely like that, especially like working PNNL, any of the research stuff for out at Hanford, Idaho National Labs, Sandia National Labs down in New Mexico. They like to see that lab work because you're designing your own projects, you're outlining what you're going to do, what you're trying to figure out, and it really helps with all those government-based, grant-based work areas. If you're wanting to go out into industry, best bet is to try to get internships. You can start internships as early as between your freshman and sophomore year. There are more specialized internships once you get to between your junior and senior year, but internships are very helpful, and a lot of internships will actually lead to a full-time job at that company.
How did you find your internships, or what advice would you have?
So for me, I wasn't originally going to be an engineer. I was going to be an ag major. But my parents weren't okay with it. So I went into engineering, and so the engineering companies I was looking at are ones that are more focused in agriculture. So I was looking at your ConAgra, Weston, Simplot type of stuff. And honestly, I heard back from Weston first. I got a job offer that I was happy with, and I've just kept on chugging from there.
Questions? I know, she's inspiring.
So job fairs are the biggest thing. You said take multiple internships. How many internships did you do in total then?
I worked in 3 different labs at WSU.
On campus? Oh.
On-campus labs. And so I worked in more of a bioengineering lab, looking at how to, one of them was wastewater treatment, one of the projects I worked on. Trying to think of what. We also did some harvesting of cartilage for cow knees, and we're using that cartilage to simulate human cartilage for an artificial cartilage growth to implant in the body. And so we're in the very, very early stages on that. And then we're also working with, I took a bunch of classes in catalysis and was working on fuels and things like that.
That's so cool.
So I had a lot of fun.
For someone that's going for a degree, my major is going to be a bachelor's in science and applied technology at Eastern Washington University in Cheney. It's a pretty diverse, broad type of degree. It's kind of, I was told by the main professor, it's kind of like IT, kind of business admin smushed together. For someone such as myself, I took it mainly because I'm not 100% sure what exactly I want to do. What kind of advice would you give to someone
So I would just start talking to, discussing with people that work at different companies, maybe, around the degree that you're looking for, and see what they do. Just ask them questions. I mean, just ask them, like, what's your day-to-day at work? What are you doing with your job? And just get an idea of what makes, because you really need to find a job that makes you happy. Yeah. And so figure out, by talking to people that do those kind of jobs, of which direction do I want to go. Because doing IT stuff for a big company like Weston, you could be looking at individual programming for a process line, or you could be looking at the bigger picture, making sure all the networks work. And so it can be very different based on what industry you go into. Because like at a petroleum plant, they have to have their different pieces of equipment talk to each other. And if you have something not talking to, two pieces of equipment not talking to each other, you could have a catastrophic event. And so the person, say in your job, would be like that key person to make sure that doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. And so it's just a matter of what's your niche? What do you like to do?
Gotcha.
Keep asking questions. We always, I mean in general in life, like always be asking, like, hey, I kind of like your job. How did you get there? What do you do?
And networking is about the best thing you can do. I mean, I'm a chemical engineer, and just because of the people I know, the relationships I made at the company, I was asked to step into the environmental position. Whereas I don't have any environmental training, period. I made fun of the environmental students in college.
Gotcha.
And so now, yeah, I'm in environmental.
When you said you went to multiple career fairs, what were you handing to these people? Just copies of a resume? I personally am working on perfecting a letter of intent or statement of purpose right now. Would you hand that to them as well? Or what were those conversations like? What was exchanged?
So a lot of times resumes are a big thing. Mm-hmm. Usually you want to limit it to one page, max front and back. Because if there's a lot of stuff, you're going to get bogged down. But also one of the things that a lot of companies do is they have an automatic system that reads resumes. They are looking for keywords. Mm-hmm. And so different areas of like processing for chemical engineers, the keywords from the processing like distillation, heat exchange, fluid dynamics, those are big things that hit on resumes. And a lot of the companies, they have a sorting system of if you don't have X number of keyword hits, you're automatically in the junk pile.
I heard of that. Yeah.
Yep, there's a lot of companies that do it just as an auto sort. And so a lot of the four-year universities have resume building classes. And a lot of the engineering departments will actually have one just for that engineering department. And they have students who have graduated, they'll come back and look over it. They'll have upper class students, they'll have grad students and stuff like that who can all help with resume building. But when you submit a job application, the cover letter or message of intent is really, really important, because I've seen a couple of my friends that it just doesn't line up with the industry. It was very broad, it was, just general. And they're like, well, why would this person want to work in potato processing? Why would this person want to work in a distillery? Or petroleum industry. And so if you, like at WSU, they hand out the list of companies that'll be there a couple weeks beforehand. And so what my friends and I did is we actually did different letters of intent, different objectives for different companies. And so kind of angle it towards that company or towards that industry to really catch their eye of, I did my homework, I know what you do, this is why I'm interested.
Gotcha.
And what points were you looking at in companies? So it's kind of a two-way street.
I don't like living in a big city.
There you go.
I want to live in a small town, so I was looking at stuff that could be done in Moses Lake, Spokane area, Tri-Cities. I mean, it's about as big as I want to get. But I liked the petroleum industry. I liked the stuff up in Alaska, but I know I wouldn't survive living in Blaine or Bellevue or Seattle. I can't stand it. So I kind of angled at companies where I could live where I'm more comfortable living.
One of your major products you said is potatoes?
Yep.
Who is the largest buyer of potatoes? Is it McDonald's? I heard it was like 15% or something they use of the entire United States. Or who is it?
We actually produce the mac fries at our Hermiston plant. But like depending on what facility it is, depends on what is your big hitter for customers. Like the facility I'm at, the Taco Bell nacho fries, we made all of those. And so for that limited time offer, that was one of our biggest runs. We were running that most days of the week. Some other big ones are Jack in the Box and Arby's. Smaller runs are Buffalo Wild Wings wedges. We do Dairy Queen, Burger King.
What about Red Robin's? Because their whole gimmick is bottomless fries, right?
I was about to say, I know we don't do steak cuts at our plant, but I think we do them at other plants because I've had them at the tech center where you can try a little bit of everything.
Oh, so you get fed at least.
Yes.
Awesome.
I was going to say, worst case, you can always go in the lab and say you're doing, a taste test.
That'd be
Repetition experiments.
And then, like, we have a plant down in Delhi, Louisiana that does all of our sweet potato products.
What's your average day-to-day look like then?
My day-to-day depends on what call I get at what time in the morning. Right now, I'm currently in charge of all of our wastewater treatment. So that's from the point it hits a gutter in the plant until we get it out on a field, because we apply to all of our alfalfa fields. We have about 3,000 acres. And so I'm in charge of it from getting to the gutter, getting into the settling tank, all the way up to the spray fields. And so if a line breaks, if the water smells too bad, I have problems and I have to deal with it. Other days, I can be involved in different kinds of audits. Some days it's just a bunch of data entry for, we have to report different items, different numbers and stuff like that for our wastewater. And so some days I'm just bogged down, just sitting at a computer putting in numbers. Other days I'm walking through the plant, seeing where we're getting the smells from, what's possibly causing more BOD, which is the bio-loading from biological matter, and then there's COD, which is chemical matter. And so I go through the plant every so often and figure out where our major sources of any sort of loading is, which if you have potatoes going in the gutter, they're going to break down and make smell.
So a lot of quality assurance work, basically.
Pretty much everybody has their hand in quality assurance, whether it's the product going out or, in my case, the gross stinky water going out.
Gotcha. And one of the biggest things a lot of my professors will tell me is it's not so much that students don't know their know-hows, for me like the IT classes and everything, but one of the major reasons why a lot of people have issues once they get out of university and transferring actually into the workforce is their communication skills.
I was about to
Is that
say,
true?
you can teach technical. You cannot teach people-to-people interactions. Communication, it can be taught, but it's a very slow process. So somebody would rather have a go-getter, somebody that can communicate, that can work in a team, that maybe is a little bit weaker on the technical side, because you'll learn it. I mean, nothing I do is in any of my textbooks, other than doing Excel sheets. We did lots of Excel sheets in engineering, and that's the main crossover from class to actual workforce. But, yeah. the stuff you learn in class, just depending on what you do, some fields it is more of I can actually use my textbook and help me out on the day-to-day. Other things it's I'm bouncing ideas off of somebody, I'm coming up with this part of the plan and you're coming up with that part of the plan and this person's coming up with this part of the plan and we're putting it together and actually making a final product.
Wish that they added more group projects and stuff. The only time I've only gotten to do one group project in English 101.
Wait till junior and senior year. You'll get your fair share.
Gotcha.
I don't know if this was already answered. One of the things that I'm struggling with as a student is the time management between different projects, whether it's been one class or multiple classes, and finding that time. Do you run into similar issues on the job, and if so, how do you manage that?
I actually do quite a bit because there's different things like reviewing operation manuals and technical manuals and stuff like that of what's our correct maintenance plan, what is the correct operations and stuff like that. But then you also get into things of you got to do this reporting by this date. And so a lot of it is just prioritize. If you got something due on Friday and you got something due in 2 weeks, make sure to get that task that's due on Friday done first. But a lot of it is just sitting down and making sure when you do spend the time, make sure you're focused. Because 2 hours being focused is a heck of a lot better than 5 hours being scatterbrained.
That's me, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I mean, we all dealt with it in college. I mean, we all had, like, I was taking 7 or 8 classes at one time. I was up around 19, 20 credits, and I had group projects in 5 of them. And some of my friends were lucky. They had all of their projects kind of intertwined, and so I can write one paper and kind of modify it a little bit, and I can turn it in for each class. Mine was on different sides of the globe. And so it's just a thing of, I do like to multitask a lot, but in those situations, it was more of, okay, right now, right here, I'm going to work on my project for, say, my engineering class, my engineering 301. And I'm just going to say this time frame from, say, 3 to 5 p.m., that's all I'm doing. I'm turning off my phone. I'm not going to be distracted by anybody. A lot of times we'd go rent out study rooms and pretty much just lock ourselves in there. And that's all you do. And honestly, that is some of the best time you can spend. But when you start getting to the point where you can't focus, you're completely stuck. One of the best things you can do is if you have a classmate that's working on something similar, go ask them a couple questions. Anything. I mean, a lot of times for me, if I was stuck, especially when I was here, I'd just go over to the gym. I get some of my best ideas when I'm running.
Oh, cool.
And so it's just, you're taking your mind off of it, but you're still thinking about it in the back of your head, whether you know it or not. And so I know a lot of people, they'll wake up in the middle of the night and have this brilliant idea. Just jot it down, go back to sleep. It'll help you out in the morning. It'll click again when you wake up.
There's a mathematician that did that. Maybe like various mathematicians, so that's cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, anything else?
Same with time management thing. Did you work as well, or were you doing work experience or tutoring as well while you were in class?
So when I was here, my first semester here, I was playing softball on the softball team.
Oh, nice.
Unfortunately, in the winter, I blew out my knee during winter practice, and then I started working here. And so I was maxing out my hours here, and then I was also studying outside of Gary's office most of the time. And even if you're studying, even somebody knows you're a tutor, they're going to ask you questions on your own time too. Especially when you have certain professors that say, go to Kirstin, here's her hours. And sometimes they'd miss my hours, so they'd ask me anyways when I was just doing my own stuff. But when I was at WSU, I was doing a lot of lab work. I worked in multiple different labs for multiple professors over the years. And it works well if you're taking, like your 18 credits as your kind of your max for normal tuition. 18 credits working in the lab is easy, 18 credits or less. When you start getting over 18 credits, you get to the point of, it's 10 p.m., how am I going to get lab work done? And so there was one of my semesters where I just had told the professors, I'm like, I can do any explaining, I can write any documents you need me to pass it on to somebody else, but I got to take a break. And And I know a couple of my friends here, they unfortunately didn't make it through the program because they weren't able to balance the work, school. Because working 40 hours a week, it makes it hard.
Yeah.
I know a couple people who've done it. I know a lot who've ended up in different areas. They've dropped out of engineering or college altogether. And so it's really one of those things of you gotta find your sanity. If you're getting stressed to the point of you're about ready to have a mental breakdown, you gotta change something, whether it's just buckle down and drop a class or tell your boss I gotta cut back my hours, but you gotta do a school work balance if you're trying to hold a job. And then once you get into a career, there is a definite work-life balance. I get yelled at for this one all the time because I'm at work way too much. But my boss's big thing is you gotta have a life outside of work. You can't just work 24/7. You're gonna get burnout or your product quality is gonna decrease.
Earlier, before the camera was turned on, you were describing things that you could do and you had to pick two. Can you re-describe that again?
Okay, so the joke in engineering is you have multiple aspects of life. You have sleep, you have relationships, you have school, you have a social life. I'm trying to think. There was 8 of them that we were talking about when I was in college. And generally it's a pick 2 or 3. If you want to get a full 8 hours of sleep, you want to get good grades, and you want to have a relationship, or you want to have a social life, it gets pretty hard. And so you got to plan your times of I'm going to buckle down and study, and then a lot of times once you get done with that midterm week, you can go out and have a social life. You have a little bit of time to let loose, have some fun. As I say in college, be a little stupid.
Were you ever stupid?
We're not going to talk about that. But it is a lot of balancing. And all I can say is your productivity when you're working on 3 hours of sleep is a lot worse than when you get your full 6-8 hours of sleep. Make sure you get your sleep before your exams. I know a lot of people that think, oh, I'm going to stay up all night, I'm going to cram, I'm going to study, and then I'm going to walk into my exam. A lot of times, you're so fried by the time you walk into that exam that you're toast. And it's like, maybe if you didn't do so much cramming and you got a little bit more sleep, you were a little bit more relaxed when you got up, you would have done a lot better. But big thing in engineering, it's not a cram sort of thing. I mean, cramming is, there's too much that you learn throughout a semester or a quarter in engineering to try to cram it all in one night. If you learn it for the long term, you're going to be much better off. And so you're learning in small increments as you go through classes. And I'm not the best one to say I went to class every day, but going to class every day and actually learning the material as you're going through it, everything builds on itself. So if you miss a chunk of class, you're going to miss one of your building blocks, and so you're going to struggle through this whole stream of work. And so if you have questions, you're not getting something, always go to your TAs and professors early. The earlier the better, because otherwise you get so buried and so far behind that it's almost impossible to catch up.
And I think I watched a TED Talk or something about that. The human brains, we learn best in chunking or clustering or something or another like that. So
I was about to say, and here a lot of your classes are 5 days a week. If you go to a semester system like WSU, UI, a lot of other out-of-state schools, they're on a semester system. So here you deal with maybe 11 weeks worth of material.
Mm-hmm.
There you're looking at 16.
Oh, wow.
So you're over a wider range, you're getting more information. So 3 quarters is equal to 2 semesters of learning. You'll get the same amount. And so where here, there's a lot of people that on the quarter system, they can learn it for the moment, get through their midterm, get through their exam, get through their final, whatever, do a brain dump at the end of the semester, and they're fine. In a semester system, it becomes a nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
There's just too much that you learn over too big of a period of time that if you're not learning it for the long term, you get lost.
And you were saying ways to learn it for the long term then. One, you're using the resources that you have between your teachers and TAs, but how did, on an individual, or on your own time when you didn't have that, what were you doing to prepare for that?
How do I relate it to reality? So how do I relate it to my life? And so like if you're taking physics and you're learning like angular, you know, your rotating speeds versus your linear speeds, just think of how your car works. I don't know, I like working on my car, so how many times does my tire have to go around to go a mile down the road or 100 yards? And so just relate it to everyday life. Because if you learn a math equation, math, you can learn math, but how much can you relate it to real life? So like if you're here and you're in differential equations, I'm just looking at changing a number from this to this in that class. That's about all the more you learn. You learn how to mathematically do this rule, this equation, stuff like that. Once you get into college, your whole life is differential equations. Because every single thing you do is a differential equation in engineering. And so it's more of, if you have time outside of class, if you know engineers, if you can talk to your professors, how do you relate it to everyday life or things you're interested in? Just like if you're, when you're comparing velocity versus acceleration, you can go back to driving in your car. How do those relate? And how do you change them from one to the other? For any sort of, for chemical engineering reactors, all the formulas you'll use for a chemical reactor is based on a differential equation and solving that differential equation, figuring out how much time it takes for certain reactions to take place to get to the point that you want to be. How long does it take to get to equilibrium? In mechanical engineering, I believe it's your moments are differential equations. How do you balance things and make them so they're going to stand up and they're not going to crash? Everything you do is a differential equation, and the faster that clicks in those classes, the better off you are, because I know my first 3 weeks of class, I was not clicking. I'm like, this looks familiar, but how the heck do I do it? It's like, and then finally the moment hit where it clicked. This is DPQ. This class is kicking in. It's really easy. I did this all the time. And so a lot of it is, you'll learn a lot of stuff where you're just looking at the math behind it. You're not looking at applications, but you're just looking at math here. And so if you can talk to the professors on what's a real life application for this, that's really how it clicks and it sticks.
Your brain can't learn unless it has a connection. So whether it's mechanical or another to class or like something earlier in that lecture, your brain can't learn something that's just floating in midair. It's not how our neurons work.
I was about to say, an equation's equation. If it doesn't mean anything, it doesn't stay with you.
Big stories.
Yeah, 141 is done out of my brain. So I'm like, what do you want now?
And so,
You want to graph what?
just remember, you're taking calculus and you might think of, what am I doing with these numbers? Trust me, you'll get there. If you stick in engineering, you will definitely get there. It'll be your life. Make sure you pay attention to those classes, otherwise it'll bite you in the butt later on.
Hey.
But one of the things I can say is, so I took classes from Rudy and Gray and Gary, and that was and Barb. Those were my professors here. And I walked into WSU, and one of my comments that I got from all my professors is, my math skills are stronger than those that went to the university first off. The majority of the students that were in my engineering program, unless they were a dual major as a math major, my math skills were way stronger than theirs. We'd sit down in tests and there's this much application and there's this much mathematics. I might have had a little bit of problems with the applications because it was still, I was still trying to get it to click what the application was, but the math I could buzz right through it. I'd have people that get hung up on the math step. And for me, it's a simple step. But for them, they're running out of time on an exam. For me, I was walking out of there 20, 30 minutes early. And part of it's because here, you have a question, you go ask your professor. You go ask the person teaching you. At a university, unfortunately, most of the time you have to go to a TA. And not all the time is your TA going to speak the same language as you. You'll have people where English is their second language, or their third, or their fourth. And so when you're trying to get things in layman's terms where, it'll help you remember it, it doesn't always happen. And you'll even have professors who came in and they don't speak good English. I had one full class where the only information I truly got from the class is what was written on that whiteboard. It was difficult, and I am so happy I had somebody that understood electronic materials better than me, because I know electricity goes zap zap and it hurts. And we had to pass a 300 level electrical engineering class.
Ouch.
And so do not take it for granted that you have the teachers you have here, because what you learn from them is a lifesaver once you get to university.
What kept you motivated going through all that process and everything?
I had a vendetta against my family. They told me I couldn't be an engineer when I decided to be an engineer, so I wanted to prove them wrong.
Gotcha.
Vengeance. Oh, that's vengeance. No, listen,
But no, that was my big push. Is because chemical engineering is seen as one of the harder disciplines. So I wanted to prove to my family that my cousin might have done civil, but I'm doing chemical, and I'm going to get through it, and I'm going to pass this. And then at some point in time, I decided to add on pre-med. I don't know where my brain went then, but I got through it.
Pre-med and
Chemical engineering.
Wow, you're a brave soul. Wow. That's
And the nice
amazing.
thing is like for my math and chemistry minors, it was an extra 2-credit class for each one. And so it was an easy thing to pick up. I went to the class once a week, and that was about it. And all of a sudden I get 2 more things on my degree.
That's really cool.
Any other questions?
Because I actually want to do chemical.
What advice at SFCC would you give students?
I was about to say, you have great resources just on the other side of the hallway. Use them. That is going to be your best bet. Make sure, if you're going into engineering or anything that's heavily dealt with in math, make sure you learn it. Make sure it's, you know it like the back of your hand. Because that'll make engineering so much easier. As I said before, there are so many students who, they struggle with the math. They can get the concepts, but they can't figure out the math. And that's what holds them back from getting those better GPAs. And then, I hate to say it, but your first job, it's going to be based on what your GPA is. If you got a bad GPA, it's hard to get a first job. Once you get your first job and you're out there in the workforce, they're going to look back to previous employers. They don't really care about your GPA after your first job. But you got to have something to present to them to get that first job. You just got to get your foot in the door.
You had a 3.7, you said?
Yeah, I ended up with 377 with all the chaos.
Wow. I'm trying to struggle and stay at that 3.5 or above, like right
I was
there.
about to say, and I mean, 3.5 is great. And then also one of the things you got to look at is different schools have different requirements for different programs. Like WSU mechanical engineering, generally they're looking at 3.5 to a 3.7 or above. Chemical engineering, they just got a whole slew of students, and I think they actually put the bar at 3.2 to 3.3. And so, I mean, you need to do your homework. I mean, you can do your homework and say, say UW has a great program for this, or WSU has a great program for that. But make sure you can stand up to the rest of the group that are trying to go into that major, so you have the chance. Because I had a couple friends at WSU that they couldn't get into the program.
Just because their GPAs were too low?
Yep. They didn't make the list because you only have so many seats in a class. And like with chemical engineering, bioengineering, generally I have this class and it's offered once a year. It's one shot to get in it, and there's X number of students allowed. So they only put so many students into the programs.
No waiting lists? Nothing.
There's a little bit of a waiting list, but a lot of times it's those people that are above that bar that are still waiting to get into classes.
Wow.
And so that's a big thing, is make sure you do your homework to make sure you can stand up with the rest of them at that school. I mean, maybe your top school, for example, one of the ones I know about quite a bit is veterinary medicine. I have a lot of friends that go into veterinary medicine. And even just being female versus male changes the bar. Because they're looking at getting more female versus male and more male versus female into a certain industry. And so you can be a guy and get into a program with a 3.5, or you can be a girl and you have to have a 3.8. Or it can be or it can be switched.
That's, they want more males in elementary, but it's almost easier to get in if you're a male from that perspective.
It's whoever's
Oh, I see.
underrepresented, yeah.
Yeah.
So like nursing,
Yeah.
very female dominated.
Yep.
So female nurses need a 4.0.
Small animal
Yeah.
veterinary medicine.
Yep.
Very female dominated. They need more males because every cattle farmer needs a vet. Is a 110-pound girl going to be able to wrangle those cattle to give them their vaccinations and stuff?
Well, it's also
Not
good
so
just
much. They usually want to go pet the pretty puppy and kitty and take care of them. And so it just depends on what field you're going into. And so, I mean, maybe you're shooting for the stars with, I'm going to put in for the school, but really before you make your final decision, look at the programs, look at the requirements, and do a comparison of yourself versus those. Because it's not very fun when you go to a school and you got into this amazing school, but I can't get into the program. I've seen a lot of people just get crushed over that, and then you have to rethink what you want to do.
Cry.
Yeah, I see it. But trying to think. Yeah, it's a big shocker for a lot of people that don't know any better. And then check any programs, because certain programs, not so much in engineering, but in other avenues, they require certain amounts of job shadowing and things like that. I had a cousin that just started nursing school at WSU. She didn't realize that she had to have so many hours working in hospitals before she could get into the nursing program. So she has an AA through Running Start, but she's having to take a bunch of classes. She's having to do the job shadowing, do kind of CNA work at the hospitals. And she also started a series in the community college, but she didn't finish the series, so it doesn't count, period. You have to start over from square one.
I thought that would count though, as a CNA to LPN or LPN. And then
It does, but so say if you went to school here and did 141, Math 141, so you took Calc 1. And so next you're thinking, in January I'm going to start at WSU, but I took 141 here. So WSU, again, because they're on the semester system versus on the quarter system here, you didn't learn as much in 141 Calc 1 as they do in their Calc 1. So you got to start over. I did college in the classroom at my high school, and so I took Calc 1 through UW. The different editions of the same textbook had chapters out of order. So the chapters I did in Calc 1 were not the same chapters that we're learning here in Calc 1. So I actually had to retake Calc 1.
Wow.
And so if you start a series, your best bet is just finish the series at the institution you're at. And then also look, because, so here they have different series of chemistry. For chemical engineering, the 161 series is required for here. And so you want to make sure that you're taking the right series. And a lot of those universities will actually have a directory that says, okay, if I want to go into this program, my prereqs for that program are these courses at these institutions. So like WSU, for most of their programs, they tell you exactly what classes you have to take here at SFCC. So that you can walk in straight as a junior, you're not having to do any catch-up, you're not having to do half a year as a sophomore. But like when I went from community college to university, at UW, they make you prove yourself for a year before they'll actually put you into a program. You have to do a full year of proving I can get this GPA before you can actually get certified into a program. So at WSU, I took a couple college classes. I actually had summer school over there overlapping with spring quarter over here. But I got one class taken in the summer and I was squared away certified into chemical engineering. If I would have done the same exact thing at UW, I would have been sitting over there for a year, knocking my head against the wall, taking pretty much general university requirements, showing that I can get a good enough GPA to get into that same program.
Even though you already had your AA.
I had an AST from here, but they make you prove yourself before they will certify you and do that program. And so there's a lot of little things that a lot of people don't know about until you get there that you want to keep an eye out for. And so a lot of it is, if you know what school you want to go to, you know what program you want to get into, the general advisors for those programs are very, very helpful. Because a lot of programs you'll have your general advisor who is just a person that is really good with keeping track of schedules, saying you have these 20 classes to take, you've taken these 10, this is what you need to take. And then you also have faculty advisors who are in your program, and they are the ones that you go to for questions on, can I really take this class load? Am I going to go insane? Am I going to lose my mind? Or is it possible? And they will be realistic with you because they want you to succeed.
I know exactly what you're talking about because I went to at EWU. Every time I go in there, I'm like, I want to talk to a C-STEM advisor.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I ask for that because there's like you said, the generals.
Yeah, where they can do schedules. Yeah, time A lines up with time B, which lines up with time C versus what do these classes actually require of you? How much studying time is there in these classes? And that's where the faculty advisors are so much more help.
I don't know if this is too personal, it's dealing with the finance, but it just seems that universities are now, almost every year is going to be more and more and more that you have to pay. Were you at school off of all scholarships, or did you have to take loans out to pay for some of it?
Every single cent was out of pocket for me.
Hard, I get.
Wow, really?
I paid cash from my savings the entire time that I was here at Spokane Falls, and I started into student loan territory the moment I stepped into WSU.
There's no grants or scholarships for you?
Unfortunately, with my parents' situation, they were just above that bar.
Oh, your parents made. Oh, you were under 25 when you started.
Yes.
And then your parents made too much.
And so, unfortunately for me, a lot of the scholarships that I put in for within my department, my best friend got.
Oh, congrats, but not congratulations.
Yes. Like, I love you, but I really hate you right now. And so, like here, I did work study. My work study paid my rent every month. And so, I mean, I was still using what I had slightly left in my savings from working in cherry orchards over the summer for my day-to-day stuff. But working here in the math lab, I was able to pay my rent every month.
Eat ramen noodles.
I ate a little bit better than that because my parents are very, very nice.
Oh, nice.
Gotcha.
But make sure you get your fast food.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the other outside grants and scholarships I've applied for, that's at least the top 3 things they always ask for is input your FAFSA information.
Mm-hmm.
Following, because there's some that are posted out here for C-STEM programs and stuff, and I take pictures of it all and I go home and try and apply for everything that's applicable for me. And, yeah,
And
they
then,
want
like,
the FAFSA.
with your FAFSA program, generally you do that in January. But then taxes roll around, taxes aren't due till April. So there is an option to send in tax information later. This is one of the places where my parents weren't very good at things. They didn't always remember to send in their tax information for me.
Oh.
You gotta make sure you get that in, and so it's time to be adults. Let's do our taxes earlier rather than later, and that way you can do it all at once. You can get your tax info right when you're filling out your FAFSA. It makes it so much easier. Unfortunately, I was still a dependent.
Those are good questions, though.
They can claim you, but you were living at your own apartment, but they were still claiming you as a dependent on their taxes?
Until 24.
Until
Doesn't matter.
24.
I didn't know you could do that.
Unless you're-
It was more beneficial for me to be claimed by my parents than it was for me to file my own taxes. Minus the fact that they didn't turn in their tax stuff for my FAFSA.
It's always helpful. Communicate this.
I think that's why they have more group projects as you get further along, and also they require the technical writing. A lot of the different group projects in like chemical engineering at WSU. So you have presentations that you have to make. So you're given a piece of equipment, piece of processing equipment, whether it's a dryer, a heat exchanger, a distillation column, a bioreactor, all sorts of different stuff, a fermenting setup. So you get to design your own experiment. You have to plan out what the steps are, what experiments you're going to do on what days, and then what you're trying to get. So I'm doing A to get B. And then at the end of that experiment, you have to present it in front of your entire class plus a select group of engineering professors. Then we have a capstone class that's our senior year. So half of your first semester senior year, all of your second semester senior year, you're working on a project, and it's usually for an industry partner. And so you have to go and present that project to not only your industry partner you're working with. Some examples with our industry partners was Boeing, WRPS down in Tri-Cities working at a Hanford site, CH2M Hill, and then there was some internal WSU ones. But you have to present it to your industry partner what your findings are. You have to present it to the board out of the college. So it's a big panel presentation, and then you also have to make a poster and you have to present it at our senior poster presentation boards where you actually have like all your engineering professors, different disciplines. You have administration from the college going through, hearing your spiel, and they actually have fake money, and you get to give so many dollars to who you think did best, and then there's a little prize at the end of the day for whoever got the most dollars.
Wow.
And so they have really pushed it into the programs of having to present and having to communicate your findings. Because one of the biggest things that I see is if you can't communicate, you're not a benefit to the company. Because you may be the most brilliant person out there, but if you can't communicate what you're figuring out, what you're finding, what you're looking into, it's a loss. Because if you can't tell, like in Weston, we have 20-some plants. If you find this, amazing piece of equipment that just does so much better than what we always have had, if you can't talk and communicate that idea to the other facilities, what good is it? Yeah, you can benefit your facility, or you need the capital dollars to get, a full-scale model in place at your facility. If you can't communicate that to senior leadership, you're not going to get the money for it. And so that's a big thing, is being able to communicate, get your ideas across, and why it's a benefit. And so, biggest thing, communication is key across the board. Like, I started out college, I hated presenting in front of people.
Look at you now.
Yeah.
I was about to say, I've done multiple presentations for capital projects in front of our whole entire senior leadership team for the entire company.
Oh, wow. Oh, my.
And so you have senior manufacturing engineers and senior finance specialists and all this, and then you have your VP and your president of the company and your CEOs, and you have to tell them why you're asking for money. And you have to make them believe that it's a good investment. And that's truly going to fix your problem.
And you learned those skills starting here.
Pretty much. I like to hide in high school.
Did you tell them what town you came from?
Okay, so I grew up in Orville, Washington. Little tiny, barely a dot on the map, up above Wenatchee, right on the Canadian border. Put it this way, my high school maxed out at Algebra 2. That is the highest math class we had. Our graduating class was 38 people.
Wow.
So kids there, they're either farmers or their parents came in to do the agricultural jobs. Most of our population was seasonal. Half my class didn't speak a lick of English.
What?
Spanish.
Spanish? Oh, I was going to say Spanish or French.
The Hispanic population for the crops.
Migrant workers.
Oh, I see. Gotcha.
And so I came from that. My junior year, I ran out of math. I was taking Algebra 2. They just happened to have a trig class because there happened to be more than 10 people that could take it. And so they had a trig class my sophomore year, and then my junior year I ended up moving to Deer Park because they actually offered higher level math, and it was still a little tiny town. And then when I was there, they offered college in the classroom through UW and Eastern. So I did about 30 college credits while I was in high school. Never had to leave the high school, just went to high school every day like everybody else. Didn't interfere with sports or anything like that, so it was really nice. And then when I went to go to college after high school, I had acceptances from Cornell, Duke, Washington State, University of Washington. But I decided that I was going to try my hand at sports. So I came here, was on the softball team, ended up hurting myself, and decided, you know what? My class and my career is going to get me a heck of a lot farther than any sport. So quit softball and started working here in the Math Center, just focusing on my studies and trying to get as much as I could for what I was doing.
That helps us understand why you definitely want to be in small town USA.
What was the process as far as you getting an internship at the company you're at now, and what advice would you give as far as, I guess, more advice for me or anyone trying to apply for internships? What do you submit? What's that?
So you submit generally a resume and possibly a cover letter. But the biggest thing is do your homework on the company. So don't just walk around a career fair of, oh, hey, I saw the flyer yesterday, so I dressed up nice, I printed out some resumes, and I'm going to go hand them out. Because walking up and talking to somebody that works for the company, this is what they live and breathe, if you don't know a dang thing about it, you're just going to go in the crap pile. Do your homework, make sure you know what the company does. Find something that you're interested in the company, because a lot of internships are task specific. If you say, I want to learn more about how to, like in processing potatoes, how to filter the oil to reduce possible fires in your fryers. They'll put you on a project that's just looking at that. They might send you to multiple facilities to look at what equipment do they have, what problems do they have, what is the history with fryer issues, stuff like that. But make sure there's something that you like that's in the company and something that you could really dive deep into. Because I can tell you right now, there was a couple times where I went to career fair and there was a couple companies where somebody started talking to me and it's like, I have no idea what you guys even do. I'm trying to figure it out by your display, and you just kind of sound stupid. And so I know some of the kids that had the best of luck, they actually took, because we have over 100 different companies that come into career fairs at WSU. They went through it and they decided, say, on 8 or 10. They knew the companies well, they did their homework, they spent the previous week, researching the companies, what do they do, and everything else, and they were able to carry on a long conversation with the reps from the company. And that's just a big part of your networking. One of our innovation engineers at the company, he's one of the first ones I got to know when I was looking at internships. And so as soon as my name popped up on the list, I had him and several of his friends who had talked about me saying, pick her. And so just getting to know people, getting your name out there, having a good reputation is a big part of it.
That was a lot of information you've given us.
Any
It
more?
was very good.
Were there any more questions? There were some really good questions.
Did you have any
I
others?
guess, sorry,
No, please.
I was about to say,
I
you
took
can
a
ask
nap. I
about anything.
spent all my time working on that technical writing paper, actually, last night.
So fun.
I don't know what was wrong with it, I was just telling him, it's ready to turn in, why
One
haven't I
of
turned it in?
one of my favorite papers in technical writing though was you had to write instructions for something.
Oh, the manual?
So mine was on how to make Muddy Buddies.
Ooh, the crunch, dipped in chocolate, crunchy.
The Chex Mix with the chocolate and the
Yeah.
powdered sugar. And so we gotta have the fun of you bring your ingredients or your pieces and parts or whatever, and the rest of the class has to build it based on your instructions.
Nice.
Luckily, I did this also in high school, and it was you had to write instructions on how to make a PB&J sandwich. And so the teacher had actually taken, read your instructions, put peanut butter on bread. Literally take a jar of peanut butter, put it on the loaf of bread.
Oh.
And so, and I have learned with the job I have now, because I do have to write instructions for the, workers for different areas on how to do things. And with some of those groups, it literally is step 1, take the lid off. Step 2, grab your butter knife, scoop up some peanut butter. Step 3, spread across bread that you have taken out of the bag and set out. And so it really is helpful in engineering, understanding your audience. Because you can talk engineering all day long, but if you're talking to a liberal arts major, over the head, they're going to be deer in the headlights on you. So make sure you know your audience and talk to your audience so they understand.
I understood.
Yay!
I understood.
I'm still doing tutoring here, and I feel like I run across a problem where we get a wide range of students who are taking math, but they're going different ways. And then it was a problem just like, okay, well, 4 to the 5th power is the same thing as 32 to the 2nd power. I think that was it. But then trying to explain what that's like, and I was explaining it as someone who went through the 98 process. I'm like, oh yeah, you just blah, blah, blah. And they're like, what? What did you just do?
Yeah.
Did you even hear, were you working on that
Oh,
kind of
I worked in the
communications?
Math Center for 5 quarters. Actually, and then summer too.
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry, when you that's what I meant to say. When you were a tutor here, did you run into that kind of communication difficulties?
Mhm.
And how did you go about, okay, let me take a step back, let me take my brain out for a second and focus on this differently?
Connie actually had me specialize with certain students who were having problems with other tutors. And so there was a lot of things of, part of it is there was just some days where kid gets burned out when they're trying to do something, so you just have a casual conversation, kind of figure out what they're into, what they like to do. And one of the things is relating it to what they like. You can relate the math that they're doing in any ways to what they are interested in. And so like some of the stuff, it's just like, it's math. It's really hard to explain. But if you break, like when you're talking about the different powers, different numbers to different powers, if you take it and break it up and say how, this group of 2's makes 32, and then this group of 2's makes 32, and then this group times this group equals this number, which is the same as 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, whatever. And so that's one of the ways you gotta look at it. And then also, different classes have different styles of teaching the same exact thing. So quadratic formula, there's quadratic formula, I think there's box method, there's a couple others. Some people click with certain ways. I know a lot of people that quadratic formula is beyond them.
Yeah.
They like the picture method or the box method. They can see it better. And so it's just really getting, nice thing is here you get so many of the same students over and over. You kind of get, okay, so are they more visual learners? Are they more technical, like possible engineer learners? And so it's kind of hard to explain unless you're actually just going through different problems. But it's really just, what's the method of their madness, and what is, how do they think? Because I had some people where I could get partway through and they're just like, I'm still lost. And it's like, all right, what other methods have you learned? So they'll pull out their textbook and show me a couple different methods. And we'll just go a different route.
Okay. So I didn't want to interrupt your question, it was just that was the communication part.
But yeah, a lot of it is just writing it down so they can visually see it instead of just talking about it.
Draw pictures. It's
Yeah, but
not the
there are a
most
lot of
sophisticated
pictures.
question in the world, but as somebody who would like to go into chemical engineering, is there any advice or something that sets it apart or something that I should be prepared for? Like, other than obviously
There's-
taking your chemistry and doing well in that, is there, what sets it apart, I guess? What
I was about to say,
what makes you
there's
more successful in that?
there's a lot of problem solving, and there's a lot of, it's like a big, huge puzzle. And sometimes you don't know what the picture actually is.
Okay.
So it's like doing a puzzle upside down sometimes, where you got pieces and sometimes you have all the, you know what the final picture is. Sometimes you don't, or sometimes you get boggled down in it. And so my biggest thing is a lot of times the teachers will explain their big picture first thing, and then they start digging down into details. Never forget that big picture. Because otherwise you can get lost in what you're doing and you get so buried in it that man, this was, you know, this is worth 2% of what I'm really looking at doing.
Because you have so many, you have that third element of chemistry in there, in addition to the math and the physics, so.
Yeah, and so I mean, it is difficult, it is very complex, but as you get further into the program, you'll see how all your classes end up overlapping one way or another.
Okay.
And so it's like, just because you learned it in this class doesn't mean you can't use that same thing in this class. Because that's one of the big things is like, you'll take thermodynamics. Thermodynamics will play into your capstone. It'll play into your unit ops where you get the piece of equipment, you design your project, you know, you design your experiment, and then you present your experiment. A lot of them just, they pile on top of each other. If you do chemical engineering, you'll take a class that's called transport.
Oh, yeah.
So you got mass transport, heat transport. And whether you think about it or not, you're going to use that in all your senior level classes. That's like one of your first junior level classes you'll take. But it goes into everything your senior year. And so, just step back when you need to. This is really what I'm doing. This is the goal. And that's, honestly, that's how college is too. I mean, you can bog down and, you know, upset about a class, or you can get stressed out about a class, but step back. This is a little tiny speed bump in my way to get to where I need to be. This is just a speed bump to get to my career.
Are there, when you were looking for, because I know around here it's more electrical,
Mhm.
folks to be able to have this done.
I have to leave, but thank you,
You're
thank you,
welcome.
thank you. It was wonderful. I understood everything.
You're the best.
I don't.
So,
So I guess my question is, when looking for specifically chemical engineering internships in this area, is there,
paper mill.
oh, paper mill?
Yeah, so your paper mill that's out on, I think it's Argonne?
Oh, yeah, up on the way to, not Spokane.
Yep, that's one of them. I'm trying to think of, I'm pretty sure there's a little bit of a pharmaceutical company out in Hilliard that does stuff. For the life of me, I cannot remember the name of the company. I was introduced to the company my junior year
Okay.
over at WSU, but there's one that's just right out here in Hilliard. Halliburton has, I believe, their corporate office downtown.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They have an office, yeah, I believe Halliburton has an office downtown. But you'd be amazed with how many chemical engineers actually, like the senior manufacturing guy who's like one of the big wigs on decision making, he's a chemical engineer. Do you think he does chemical engineering at his spot? He gets to sit on that nice board and say, well, why do you want money? And that's where, and a lot of companies, that's where chemical engineers get to. And one of the big things that I've talked to a lot of chemical engineers who are older than me out in industry, one of the big things that would help is if you want to go to grad school. Going and doing an engineering major in grad school is good, but a lot of times they're looking for that business mind.
Oh, so.
And so a lot of them look at, a lot of them would almost rather see you have an MBA unless you're going into research. Because then you have that business mind, so you can balance the, what do we need to do to make things work right versus what is cost effective.
So an undergraduate, a bachelor's with chemical engineering and an MBA, master's.
Is
business
very,
administration.
very valuable.
I love business and leadership.
I was about to say, I've been, while I'm doing my MBA, I've just been dragging my feet about it.
Thank you.
And so that's one of the things that I've heard a lot of companies say is, we'll actually pay for you, we'll pay part of your tuition to get your MBA because it will overall benefit the business. And then also it opens up new avenues in the business for you to climb into more management, where maybe you're overseeing engineers, or plain and simple, you could be overseeing a plant, you could be overseeing a large group of engineers. And so doing the engineering and MBA just opens up a lot more doorways for you.
Yeah, so we are in a scholarship and we had to look at, it was the first day of class, but we looked at all the different just bigwig people of the world. And a lot of them surprisingly are chemical engineers,
Mm-hmm.
people who you wouldn't expect.
It's the problem solving.
Yeah, I think the president of China's chemical engineer, the Koch brothers, a couple directors. Anyway, it was just kind of an interesting
Yeah,
group of
and
people.
so, I mean,
Married. That's cool.
like a lot of companies, they'll say, these are the majors I'm looking for when they go to a career fair. They'll actually have a list of, I'm looking for engineering, I'm looking for architecture, I'm looking for construction management, whatnot. And a lot of them just say engineers, like Microsoft, Amazon, things like that. They're looking for engineers. They're not looking for engineers to build stuff. They're looking at engineers to run stuff eventually. You're a problem solver. You can think outside of the box.
That's awesome.
And so there's a lot of things like that where it's like, you look at a company and you're like, what the heck would I do chemical engineering there? No, they want you for more of a management, you know, how to fit all the puzzle pieces together.
Cool. That's promising.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot you can do with it.
Yeah.
It
Oh,
sounds
yeah.
like, so. Not just
Yeah, no,
the
that's
one
cool.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool.
And I mean, that's how engineering is just in general, but I've seen it a lot more with chemies just because of the complexity of the program. So, you know, like, I was talking to some of the bigwigs where I work. And they're like, yeah, chemical engineer, you know, they can problem solve, they know they can balance their time, you know, they have time management skills because otherwise they would have never graduated.
Seriously.
You can solve problems, you managed to get through OChem, you managed to get through the senior design. You can solve problems. You can do math. You can look at the big picture. You can manage doing a lot of different things at once.
Those are really good questions. Any others?
Sorry, I just
Mind blown.
Mind blown. Any last words of wisdom?
I don't want to scare you,
Don't scare
but
us. It's okay.
it's just
scare the world out of
engineering.
you.
Yeah, pretty much. Engineering is a tougher discipline. Don't get discouraged. I know quite a few people who, I mean, it's just been like this one class is just like, oh my God, there's no way I can get past this. But there's hope. Study groups are your best friend.
We told that to
Said
Professor
study-
Glenn.
Study groups. Definitely, there's a lot of these things. You cannot do it on your own. Don't try to do it on your own. Whether it's a group of friends where you hang out outside of class or it's just a study group, don't go hide in the corner.
Does the NSF, besides your guidance course, do they do any like formal meeting times or study group? Is it just kind of organically do it or?
Organically.
Yeah,
I was just
because they do
curious.
a chem study group, but it was, what my teacher was doing was, we were on a different trajectory. So they're doing stuff now that we did 2 months ago. So it's
I
like,
get it, but for one section of chem,
yeah,
or it's one teacher
Yeah,
of chem.
so,
I was
I
just
mean-
curious how the NSF grant was going, because
Yeah.
we got our grants at the same time, MESA and NSF, so.
and then for our robotics class, or our robotics project, we do meet up every other week.
Okay.
And that's been helpful to talk to people
Mhm.
who've actually, I mean, most of them I think are mechanical, a lot of them are
Yeah, but
Eastern.
still.
So,
I was
but it's
curious.
nice to, hear like, it's okay, like,
Yeah.
I had to do this class,
Yeah.
like, it happens, or, whatever.
Yeah.
It kind of opens your eyes to the fact that it's not easy and
I was gonna say, we all have that one class where it's like, I passed.
yeah. That's how I feel about Gary Glaze's class right now.
See, and Gary was my favorite professor here.
Oh, I love him. I just, man, yeah, he's been getting my goat.
Okay, so Gary and Rudy, they are very, very tough teachers. You are going to learn what you're doing, plain and simple. If you take their class, you're gonna learn it because you have to learn it to get through. And that's gonna, the way they teach it, you learn it for the long term. And so, I mean, like, you can go online and at any college, there'll be the reviews, rate my professor. Don't just go with easy professors, because a lot of times easy professors, you don't really get the most out of the class that you could have. Yeah, you got an A, got a 4.0, sweet, but how much did you learn from it?
Right, it's gonna bite you in the behind later.
Yes.
So, yeah. That's how I feel with 141. It was online in the summer, but even Professor Glaze was saying, this is nothing like it is here. So you'll get through it, but you won't know it.
Yeah.
And he's absolutely right. There's so many people coming for 141 asking for help. I'm like, I can't call, sorry.
Yeah.
I was about to say, that was one of my biggest things. I refused to take a math or science class online. I took government online, I took some English online. But I just flat out refuse to take math and science online because it's the way you learn it when you're interacting with others in a classroom is so much different than when you're sitting in front of a computer. That's why I switched high schools.
I'm gonna have to take Calc 3 in the summer.
Taking the classes in the summer isn't bad.
I think it's online.
Oh, which one did, I took linear algebra with Rudy over the summer. And it may be condensed into a smaller time frame, but it's nothing to be afraid of. Same with the universities.
Yeah.
It's actually smaller classes and it's more interaction with your professor. And so don't be afraid of it, just fear online. And also, if you're taking a class, there's actually that drive to get to class rather than an online class of, I'll do it later. I'll do it later. Crap, I got 3 weeks to finish it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.